Hello and welcome to the build video for my ItPsv90 from Takom in 1/35 scale. I wanted to build this vehicle because of how unusual it is. It has a Polish T55 hull with a British Marksman anti-aircraft turret and two Swiss 35mm Oerlikon cannons. The build starts the same as most tank builds, with the lower hull. Initially there were no issues, the parts fitted together well and had nice details such as weld seams. The kit also includes some clear parts for the vision ports, but for me this won't matter as I'll just paint over them anyway. The kit comes with photo etch parts, such as for the engine grills, but unfortunately there isn't much PE in this kit. With the three top sections ready, I fitted them into place. The fit wasn't quite perfect, which caused there to be a slight gap and height difference between the front and middle sections. This was filled with Tamiya putty basic type and then sanded down. There was more filler used and other small gaps between these parts. The wheels in the kit have two main parts, one for the road wheel and one for the outer rubber layer. This might seem useful when painting them, where you could paint them separately. However, the rubber layer part also has the outer edge of the road wheel, so I still had to glue them together. The detail on the wheels are quite good. They have some small writing on the rubber sidewall and the cap can be left off if you wanted to, as there is some nice detail underneath. I wanted to add some damage and wear to the outer rubber layer of the wheel. To do this, I started by cutting out large chunks with a knife. For this part, I am only working on the side of the wheel. Later I will use more effects on the central area. I try to make sure that the parts that are cut out are not all the same on each wheel, so I try to vary the size, shape, number and position. Next I used a rotary tool with a pointed sanding attachment to go over the wheel and roughen the surface. I only use a little pressure when doing this as I only want to slightly sand the surface. In some parts I will press down harder to create larger areas of damage. Again I try to make sure that this looks random and that the same patterns don't appear on multiple wheels. Finally, I used extra thin glue to soften the plastic and melt away any excess. This is the end result of the damage and wear process. This time I made it quite heavy because of the age of the vehicle. With the wheels complete, I fitted them onto the tank so that I can start working on making the tracks. To attach the wheels to the tank, I didn't use any glue as I plan to remove them and paint them separately later. The idlers and sprockets were also kept movable to make it easier to fit the tracks. The tracks in the kit are individual links. Each link is a single part, so they only require cleanup before they can be assembled, unlike some tracks that require you to also fit the guide horns. The uneven surface on the outer side of the tracks made it difficult to keep them flat whilst assembling them, so I used a pair of tweezers to allow the guide horn side to face down. Once I have several links ready, I glue them with extra thin glue and then use a flat object to press down to make sure that they are completely straight. When one side is ready, I fit it onto the tank. For the sections that will wrap around the sprocket and idler, I have only put glue on about a minute before, so that they have not dried fully and can be bent into shape. I also use some tape to hold them in place whilst the glue is drying. For these tracks I only added them on the bottom half as the top half will be completely covered by the tank's side skirts. With the tracks and the wheels done, I removed them and set them aside for painting later. Then I start working on the rest of the tank hull. First, I add the fenders. For the parts at the front and the back, I thin them down with a metal file to give them a more realistic thickness. The fender structural supports are photo etch pieces which give them a realistic size. After this I added all of the parts onto the fenders, such as the fuel tanks, the fuel lines and the storage boxes. Next I added the tow cables. I usually add a drop of CA glue on the area where I plan to cut one end. After it dries and you try to cut it, it will stop the ends from fraying, so it makes it a little easier to work with. After the cut, it's a bit squished, so I use some tweezers to return it to the circular shape. The tow cables then get glued into place on the tank. Finally, to finish the hull assembly, I just added the various smaller parts onto the model. The detail of these smaller parts is pretty good, nothing particularly amazing, but still good enough and they all fit it without issues. With the hull complete, I turned my attention to the Marksman anti-aircraft turret. This was probably the harder part of the kit. The main turret assembly went together well and without any problems, but the guns required some work. The way that they fitted together meant that there would be lines between parts that would need to be filled and rescribed. To do the rescribing, I used a couple of layers of tape as a guide and then Tamiya rescribing tool. If you make the first couple of passes carefully, the tape can help to keep the line straight. The gun barrels themselves are also not ideal. They are in two parts with one gap in the recessed area of the barrel, making it almost impossible to fill. Luckily, it can't be seen easily. The Marconi radar system is movable, so it can be posed in a travelling position. However, the cover is fixed in place, so it wouldn't look correct. Takom uses this turret in another kit, so there are quite a few places where parts should be removed or filled in. The commander's sights are a little disappointing as the kit does not come with a cover for them. I managed to break some of the handles, so I shaped some metal wire to replace them. The smoke launchers had a bit of flash on them, and in the process of removing it I removed some of the detail. This was re-added using some rivet heads from a Meng detail set. I also wanted to add some extra detail to the smoke launchers, so I added some cables to them. Finally, I glued the guns to the turret, and with that the build is completed. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to my channel.